So yeah, I've now got your beautiful face and your beautiful mind here. It's about time.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be able to sit down and chat with you. It's been a long time, man. It's been a really long time. I think it's been 10 years
I think so. Yeah,
for you and I since
yeah, a little too long perhaps.
yeah, a lot's happened in the last decade. It's a world's a
Yeah.
different place than it was. As hard as that is to believe, right? I mean,
Well, in a way, like, if you go back to the conversations we were having 10 years ago, in a way, it's kind of everything we talked about happening is kind of here now,
yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
a little bit like deja vu talking to you now. It's like, wait a
I,
second, did we kind of just have this conversation 10 years ago? But at the same
yeah,
time, um,
it
I
really
wanted to
is.
show you something because you were actually one of the inspirations for me to pick up this bad habit as big
Uh,
as that goes. But this is my
uh,
7 Ellie. They call it a
Beautiful,
blue alligator, but I call it a blue dragon. If you look, the wood's kind of carved into scales,
beautiful.
right?
Yes, love it.
And then the stem is so beautiful that I never bite her. I always just hold her in my
Oh
lips,
yeah. See,
But
I buy what I love, so
yeah, it's quite the
no, I
practice.
appreciate
Like
that. That's
I never knew, it's like a meditation.
hmm
You're managing this tiny little furnace in your hand, and there's like a
hmm
connection with, like the reason like it used to be very blue, but it's not anymore because of me handling it so much,
yeah,
right? And while
yeah,
you're
yeah.
and yeah, it's just like that connection you have with it. It's so different. And while I was like getting into pipe smoking and figuring it all out, I ended up finding this story about the reason why they invented cigarettes was because pipes take so long to smoke. And when we got into the 9 to 5 work week, the people were going out to smoke a pipe and like coming back from their break like 15, 20 minutes, half an hour later.
Yeah, yeah,
Everybody's like, wait a second, we need to figure this out for the smokers. So that was one of the reasons why the cigarette brand got pushed so much.
yeah, absolutely. That's I love to hear you to talk about it because that's exactly what I always got out of it. It was very meditative for me, and I actually feel, like and a lot of the pipe literature talks about that too. I always felt like it kind of connects me to the various elements through it. That's it's such a multi-sensory experience, even auditory, the sound of it, and the heat, and the visual flame and the crackle, and the feel of the heat in my hand as the pipe starts getting warmed up, and she starts getting happy with you, and you've been with her for a while. She's warm. You can keep your hands warm on a cold day with it. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like getting into the different types of tobacco and the
Uh-huh.
histories behind them, and then like
Yeah.
seeing like there's all sorts of like political history tied up in tobacco too that I
Oh
never would
yeah.
have thought of before. But yeah, pretty interesting.
That's awesome that you have started to incorporate that into your life. Yeah, I still do, less frequently than I used to, unfortunately. I mean, you just seeing that makes me want to get mine out though. I got a
Well,
few, but
if I
yeah,
could
that's
smoke it while
great.
we were talking, I would, but I
Oh
can't get out
yeah,
of
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. So where are you located exactly then right now?
Toronto.
You're in Toronto. Okay, I thought you were near Toronto or like London or something, but
Well, back in the day, I was right. Like
yeah,
back when we were first working together,
yeah,
I was living north of Toronto,
yeah.
but now I'm in the heart of the city. Have been for about that amount of time. Actually, I think it was just after the website we were working on kind of parted ways
Yeah,
was around the same time. So
yeah,
yeah, I've been here ever since. I love it. I
yeah,
know you live in a big city, but like Toronto's got a lot of nature. There's like conservation areas you can go. There's coyotes on my street some nights. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like it's
yeah,
every little pocket is very, very different because it's such a highly diverse city
yeah,
that it doesn't matter which way you go walking, you're going to find something new. I've been living
yeah,
in this area for years, and last summer it was. I go walking around a corner and I bump into a cow, and I'm like, "Why is there a cow here?" I realize there's a farm in the middle of the city.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I love Toronto. Yeah, I've been there a couple times. I really enjoyed it. I actually led a tour through Toronto. I was leading a Canadian tour, and I led a tour through Toronto, and we went through Algonquin Provincial Park for like a week and stayed there, and then came through Toronto. And it's just one of the most civilized cities I've ever been to in my life. I've been a lot of places, but Toronto was a beautiful city, and the people were fantastic. And I'm trying to think I'm just losing it in a moment. The neighborhood that's kind of funkadelic. It's like the market.
Kensington Market.
Kensington Market. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Kensington Market. Yeah, that was a lot of fun down there, and I'm sure it's changed since I've been there. Though that was 2015 was the last time I was there. So I'm sure it's quite different, and including in the current socio-political environment, it's got to be different. So.
Well, that's maybe a conversation for later. But where are you? Where are you now?
I'm in Blackpool. Well, I'm not technically. I'm outside of Blackpool, England. So it's right on the Irish Sea. That's on the. If you look out from my place, I'm looking out across the sea towards Ireland. So there's like Isle of Man would be I can actually see the Isle of Man on a clear day, and then Ireland is 30 or 40 more miles just across the way. Dublin would be the closest place to where we live. I have to apologize too, Ben. I'm just getting over this super cold that's going around, the super cold that everyone's getting. So yeah, my whole family had it. Everybody but my infant. She's got like superhuman. She doesn't catch any of the illnesses, but we all had this super cold. So my voice isn't what it normally is. I have to apologize for that.
We will forgive you for that. The super cold. I like that one.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, the super cold. But when 10 years ago, when you and I were previously talking, I was living in San Francisco and had been living there I did live in San Francisco for 10 years at that time. So we moved to England during the pandemic. We moved here with our son a little more than a year ago. So I've been living here a little more than a year. I bought a house here. So just a typical English house. And anyone that lives in England will know exactly what I'm talking about. They call them 2 up, 2 down. It's a typical English house. They're very small compared to American homes. The square footage is amazingly small. It's funny. They don't even list square footage when they sell homes in England because that's not a criteria that they look for as square footage. It isn't. So most people don't know the square footage of their home here. It's funny because it's a cultural difference.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so this new podcast here, I guess we're kind of feeding the AI systems, the algorithms in a way, because like I'm calling it a library of people. I was thinking of like the Library of Alexandria, and a concept I had once heard that a lot of the books were stories. They were like, people writing out their own personal stories, kind of like memoirs, if you will. And kind of liked that idea. So I asked people to give me their superhuman origin story of like, kind of what got them to where they are. So if you don't mind doing that, tell me about little boy Josh. Tell us about little boy Josh.
Little boy Josh grew up in the Pacific Northwest, Spokane, Washington, in the rain. I'm not living in weather that's all that much different than what I grew up in. Rain and cold, bad weather, nice hot summers. But I grew up one of 5 boys. My dad ended up raising all of us. So it was a house full of men. I was a middle child, and I always had a strong proclivity for reading, and was a bit advanced for my age. Used to climb the trees in my backyard and read my books up in the trees so I could get away from the havoc of my house. It was a pretty crazy household. I had, we had a lot of guns and a lot of, a lot of professional wrestling type of things jumping around, and a lot of guns and things like that. And I had a brother actually would chase us around the property with a loaded pistol, a real loaded pistol. And he's like I have a mentally disabled brother. So a couple times he got a hold of a pistol and was chasing us around the house. I always tell people you go to horror movies to watch a horror movie. I actually lived a horror movie. I had a mentally deranged person chasing me around with a loaded pistol in my house. we had a great big old Victorian that was just falling apart. I don't think there was a single door in the house that was still on its hinges, or a single window that wasn't cracked or broken. So anyway, yeah, I came out of that kind of bubbling cauldron of you could just, it's very expressive. You could just be yourself and everything, but I didn't have privacy or personal space or anything like that. So I went to university in Seattle at the University of Washington, and I studied oceanography. I was on an oceanographic research vessel in the Bering Sea for a while, did some research out on some stormy nights, and was pretty seasick, and left college when I was in almost my senior year, and decided I was going to walk around the Middle East and just kind of go on a walkabout type of thing. And I stopped in Boston, actually, on my flight over to visit with a girl, and I ended up staying in Boston for the summer. And we got a little apartment across the street from near Fenway Park, just a block away, and just spent the summer in that apartment, watching hearing the baseball games and the screams and everything. And that was a really good, fun time. And then after that, I've had a lot of different careers since then. I ended up not going to the Middle East. Luckily, I'm happy I didn't end up going there. So, I've been everything from a swim instructor to I worked for PBS Television, which is like the public broadcasting in here in the States. Worked in children's programming for them. I've worked in a morgue for a while, processing dead people. I'm a EMT. I was rode an ambulance and worked in the emergency room for many years. Became an administrator at the hospital. I've worked in probably 10 different hospitals in my career, different places. I lived up in the High Sierras in a cabin for 2 years before I moved to San Francisco. And that's when I got involved with UCSF, which is a medical school for the University of California. And they're the number one public medical school in the US. So the number one private medical schools like Harvard or Johns Hopkins, those are private schools. The public school is UCSF. So they're like the number one, and they get the most research. When I say number one, means they get the most research dollars from the government, from NHS. That's how they rank medical schools, really. And like difficulty to get into. That's probably the other way they rank them. Anyway, but yeah, I worked for the School of Medicine there as an administrator and as a physician recruiter for many, many years. And that's what I was doing when I first met you all those years ago. And then since that time, I went freelance and do educational writing and scientific research writing. And I still work for UCSF, and I also work for University of Arizona, and I've been able to travel the world as a contractor for these people because I can work mobily and continue to do educational and scientific writing for them on a contractual basis, and kind of live wherever I wanted in the world. While I was doing that, while I was doing that contractually, I became an adventure tour guide. I started working for a couple of adventure companies where I would take groups of people, mainly Europeans and some Russians and some Australians and New Zealanders, but mainly Europeans, and take them through all the national parks in the United States and in Canada, and just teach them how to build a campfire and be outdoors, because it's something that a lot of people over here are not as in touch with, being outdoors or like in touch with nature. And while doing that, I met my wife. She was on one of my tours. So a couple years back, she and I got married at the Grand Canyon, got pregnant, came back here to England, decided to have the baby over here, moved back and forth a couple of different times. And we just happened to be in this current iteration. We just had another baby. We just happen to be over here right now, but we're by no means permanently in England. We're just kind of weathering this current storm we're all in while we're here. 10 years ago, when I was in San Francisco, I guess kind of an undercurrent through all of this in my life. An undercurrent is obviously I have had an intense interest in the paranormal and the occult, and just any kind of phenomena that can't be explained by either science or philosophy, which means we have to kind of go into another area, of that some people call metaphysics. Some people have all different labels for that area. You're familiar with it. And so I've had that as an undercurrent. And so anytime I had spare time, I've been involved with different forums and different websites and just kind of sharing and learning from everybody. And that's where I was when I met you. And I've continued with that, I guess, even if I've not as social with it. I've continued with that throughout my life, and it's brought me to where I am.
Well, yeah, I guess what the pandemic I call the joy, just for sake of censorship.
Yeah, the joy.
One solution to that is a lollipop, right? And then there's those of us who remain sugar-free. So just to avoid that language a little bit, we use this terminology here. But was the joy part of what made you get out of San Francisco?
The joy, what made me leave San Francisco was I left there in 2013, but thank you for asking that, by the way. I left at San Francisco in 2013, and it was due to my world changed in 2012. I had and from a medical perspective, somebody might call it I had like a manic break, but I was going through a number of different things in my life. I had the dissolution of a long-term relationship. Professionally, I was tired of being in the office environment all the time. A bunch of different factors converged all at once for me, and it completely upended my life and changed it. And so I left San Francisco at that time, went out to the desert in Arizona, and was able to kind of recenter and refine myself. It's about that time that I started becoming an adventure guide as well, because I needed to be out and be in touch with nature and things. So it just kind of changed. My whole life changed, and that's what took me out of San Francisco.
I was just wondering if your decision, because to go to the UK or avoid the US, maybe, is that?
Well, we went to the UK in the midst of this pandemic. So we went a little more than a year ago. So we were about 6 months into the pandemic when we decided to come to England, and it wasn't easy to get here. You couldn't fly to England at that time. What I did is I was in Arizona. What I did is we flew to Boston, and then Boston has continual flights between Boston and Dublin because so many Irish people live in Boston and their families are in Dublin. Those flights will always go because people go back and forth. So we flew from Boston to Dublin. And then from Dublin, we caught a ferry across the water to England. And that was kind of the roundabout way that we got to England. It was legal, but it was just kind of a loophole at the time. So, because we wouldn't have been able to come here just straight. Couldn't get out. There were no flights at that time. So.
How are things there in terms of that?
It's a different experience. The English people are I like to say that they're aside from Canadians, English people are the most similar culture to American culture. If you could say there is one American culture, there's many American cultures, but if you could, Americans, what they think of as their culture, English people are the closest, yet they're also still so different that it's funny living here. It's a funny cultural experience for me as a person who does pay attention to little cultural differences. England is much more of a community experience. Depending on where you live in the United States, you may not even watch the same television shows as people that live in other parts of the United States. It's different cultures, and the news is different, and you don't have a shared cultural experience in the United States that's homogenous. It's a very different cultural experience depending on where you live, and that's one reason why there's a lot of socio conflict in the United States. The cultural experience is not the same. So when people start talking, they're like, this is what's going on in the United States. And some of them, no, it's not. This is what's going on. Well, it is, depending on where you're from. You can't compare someone's experience they're living in Chicago to someone who's living in rural Florida. It's a completely different country they're living in. They don't live in the same nation, really, essentially. But England's not that way. The cultural experience is very, very homogenized. all over the England, all over the United Kingdom. And so they have this more shared cultural experience. That's a little bit of a trip as an American when you get here. For me, it's more of a trip. And there's a lot that comes with it. There's a lot that comes with that shared cultural experience that everybody has here. They feel more like they're members of a community, and you don't get that sensation in America. I'm not sure how it is in Canada as far as that experience goes with the rest of Canada.
It's probably between the two, actually, because we have a lot of diversity, right? We have people from all over the world here. So like even within Toronto, like we have like the little Italy, little Portugal, little India areas. We have like 2 different Chinatowns, things like that. And then in all the like little blocks in between, it's the same melting pot of people. Yeah. So like literally every street you walk down in Toronto is a little bit different. It's so strange. And but I know in the States, I noticed that a lot because my stepdad was a truck driver. I used to go down there for that, but even just driving in and out of states, you can recognize like, this feels more like driving into a new country again, There's like a list of rules all over again. And I'm kind of like, I don't get this, right? Like as a young Canadian, I didn't understand. Yeah,
there's a lot of misperceptions that Americans have about other countries, obviously, and that a lot of people from other countries have about Americans. There's a lot of misperceptions in general, and the media has a lot to do with that. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that a lot of Americans are not as well traveled internationally as they could be. Because we have such a big country. When Americans get holidays and vacation and they don't get much, most Americans get 10 days a year. That's max. When they get it, they travel within the United States somewhere because America has a lot of different things they can access. So Mexico is a really exotic, far off vacation for a lot of American people. And it's not that way in England. Everybody here leaves. It's not because they're better than Americans or they're smarter or more clever. They leave because they are pretty miserable with this country the way it is. And as soon as they get a holiday, and they get lots more holidays, they get on a plane and leave the country. Everybody does it. But so then they look at Americans and think, you guys don't leave America ever. So you're very provincial and you don't leave America. You're living in a box. And Americans look at them like, why? Where would you want me to fly? Like, this is a huge, huge country. If I want a tropical beach, we have it in America. If I want mountains, we have it. If I want deserts, we have it. We have all that here. If they want a beach here, they have to go to Spain. They have to leave, So I think that both cultures can be a little bit unfair to one another. One of the rules that I used to just hand out to my tour groups first day of my tours was like, look, every country, before we start this tour, you just remember that every country has good things about it and bad things about it, things that are really good, things that are really bad. And we'll talk about all of them. We're going to talk about all the bad things about the US, and there's a lot, but every one of the countries that you come from also have really bad things about them. And we can talk about those too, but there's also a lot of good things that come from here, really good things. It's a lot of good things that come from your country. So we'll talk about both of them, but if you think if anybody thinks their country's perfect, you're way off base. There isn't a perfect country, and any place can start to bug you after a while. No matter where you live, there are things that will drive you up the wall. But it's very easy to look at somebody else's culture and poke holes in it and try and criticize it and things. So
I'm Canadian, so like that's what we're best at. We're best at thinking that we're amazing, and the rest of the world is.
You guys are good. You guys are good.
Yeah, we kind of just look at like even just the common perception. It's changing a little bit, but the common perception of Americans is just like Americans are stupid. You know what I mean? Like,
of course. And a lot of them are. It's a big country. There's 300 million people there. You don't think that there's not going to be a lot of stupid people in that 300 million, but I guarantee you, in India, there's over 1 billion. There's probably more stupid people there than there are. Right? And I've been to India. Yeah, there are plenty of stupid people there. Nothing against India. I love it, but I'm just saying, I have found stupid people and narrow-minded people in every country I've ever been to. And other issues, like I've been places where people have no sense of humor. I don't understand it. They're very serious. People are different places. And that's what makes the world great. That's what makes it a colorful place. If everyone was the same, every country you went to, and the laws were the same everywhere we went, we wouldn't want to go anywhere else. It's the same, it's nice.
Oh, exactly. And
yeah,
like I think part of the thing with Canada is because we are so large geographically, and our population is so low comparatively, that we don't understand how Americans are like on top of each other. Or even in England, everyone's a little bit more on top of each other than we're used to. So I don't think we, people even at smaller towns outside of Toronto kind of look at Toronto like, I would never go there. Like, I could never live there.
Whoa, not Toronto.
And that's like very common in a lot of other places in the world. And I don't think a lot of Canadians realize that until they travel as well. So obviously traveling, I think for everyone is a good thing. Very difficult these days, but that's again a whole other conversation.
Yeah. Well, that's a shame too, isn't it? Even without starting down that road, just that fact right there is a shame that we can't travel as much now, because it does open your mind, and I think makes you a little bit more fair to others once you've traveled, and it opens your minds to possibility. Wow, that's crazy. It's just they run their society completely different than I do at home, and that's okay. That's okay. They seem to be getting on all right. It's like, I'm sure not all travelers have that. Some people go and just complain. I've seen it. They just go and complain the whole time they're somewhere else. But if you stop those people, sometimes we stop. Wait a minute. What are you really complaining about? You came to this country. What you came to visit it? Did you want it to be just like home? Did you want it to be? No, you didn't. That's why you're here. You're here. You're getting it. You're getting what you came here for. And it's sometimes that's like a realization. People are like, oh yeah, that's right.
I think that's just a human thing, though, because we do that with our whole incarnation here. If you really look at it.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
So when I was a kid, I also wanted to be a marine biologist. That was like, as a birthday gift at one point in time, my parents had this artist come in and paint my whole room as if like I was underwater and there was whales everywhere, because I was fucking obsessed with whales. And so people don't really understand it. We kind of look at space and we're like, oh wow, but guys, there's like 10% of that thing that we've checked out so far. And there's water everywhere, right? So what got you so fascinated by that same kind of idea?
It was probably James Cameron's movie The Abyss, actually, is probably what set me down the path of oceanography. That movie it's just a formative film for me. It affected me deeply when I saw it. And just that idea that most of the world is that. Most of this earth is that, and that it's that unexplored. Exactly. And it's no surprise. It's no surprise that that's what the UAPs or UFOs are utilizing now. I'd heard that that's what they were utilizing for years, to just move around undetected. And it's no surprise that's the first kind of admitted manifestation. It's like, we're seeing them zipping around the ocean here, and they're diving into the ocean. I'm like, bingo. They've probably been doing that ever since our instrumentation got sensitive enough that they couldn't, whatever they do, get into the sphere of influence, materialize, come here. They probably could no longer remain undetected the way they used to. But most of those waves don't work underwater, and so that's where they go now. Makes sense to me. No surprise.
If you take the story of Roswell, at least what some people think about the crash that happened there being due to, like, say, maybe our new technology and radio waves or radar waves or whatever it was, being the reason why that had to maybe happen, then of course they're going to learn from that real quick. Let's stay away from the places where the people are, as insofar as we can, and like, guys, like, take a look at a globe, take a look at an atlas, take a look at a map. Like, there is a lot of water out there. You think of movies like Kong Skull Island, where they find like these islands, right? Like, this happens. We do this all the time. And like, I follow marine biology discoveries as well. And like, literally you can learn about 10 new species a day very easily if you want to, because that's how quick we're finding them. Like
Yeah.
everyone's talking about alien life, but what about an octopus? What about
Yeah.
like, these other things that we've caught on cameras in deep oil rigs and stuff like that we don't even know what they are, you know? Like there's so much out there.
You mentioned octopuses. It brings up even bigger conversations about the animals that we do know exist. We don't even understand them fully, like an octopus is a great mystery, and it's always, octopus as a species is revealing more mysteries and more mysteries. And there's really big questions that just their presence on the planet brings to mind. There's other species that do that too. So we haven't even, we've just, human beings, as far as our ability to, and our capacity to understand the natural world. I mean, we have such an inquisitive mind, and we continue to delve into these areas, but we're just scratching the surface. And there's a lot of reasons why we're continually just scratching the surface. And the modern tendency towards specialization, human beings specialize, that's another thing that just keeps us from really being able to synchronize some of this knowledge and say, oh, wow, when you bring these different disciplines together, we really have a full picture of what's actually going on with our biosphere, what's going on with this planet. It's difficult to understand what's going on with the planet when you are so myopic and you focus on one little thing. It's nothing against people that go into that. And that's maybe, I don't know, maybe that's why I don't think I could just be an oceanographer anymore. I would have to be something more than that,
Well, yeah, I'd see it like if there was a little bit more communication between specializations, then this idea could work out. I can kind of see why the structure pushes people, because you need tenure, and you need grant money, and you need all these things. And without specializing, if you are kind of all over the map, it's a lot harder to narrow down on those things. But at the same time, there should be almost like a type of maybe scientist who's like interdisciplinary, right?
Yeah.
And kind of oversees like groups, and someone's sitting back going, oh, look at what they're working on there, connect the dots, la la la, and kind of like what happens with technology, because there are people who do that with technology, right? I think we need to employ the same idea.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, I've had that exact same idea. Like what would that role look like? What would that role be called? What would that be? But it seems like it's vitally needed. It seems like it's something that's needed in our world today, because it just seems like we're like fingers, we're stretching out, but we're just missing everything between the fingers. We're missing it. That's everything we're just missing. And
you hear it all the time when you think of like a doctor, like even like talking about the joy these days, like knowing nothing about nutrition, not understanding, not even really understanding natural immunity as it, or acknowledging it. You know what I mean? It's like, although these people have these titles, they're experts in these fields, it doesn't mean they know all of the other stuff that's going on and how it would impact the way that they have been educated in their own field. That's also part of the problem, right? Is that like we're not taking in new data and changing education courses along with it. That's like, say like an evolutionary, like a university course on evolution. We've taken in so much new data in the last 10 years. Those textbooks from 10 years ago are kind of wrong, so, and that doesn't really get updated. When you go to school, you're still learning, and
Yeah, no, it's true. And when you think about medical school, because I think that's really germane to everything that's going on right now. I mean, when we just look at medical school, and from my experience in medical school and that process in the United States, it's basically broken into two. You can think of it as two sections, really. And medical school is, you're learning from the textbooks, you're learning from professors the basics of things like you just talked about, like basic human immunoresponse, how to read scientific literature. These are courses that you have to take in medical school. How to establish rapport with patients, how to develop gravitas so that the patient trusts what you're saying. All of this stuff is stuff that happens in medical school. And then none of that is from you. There's no room for creativity. There's no room for innovation. There's no room for much critical thinking whatsoever. It's medical school is very rote when it comes to all of that. And then you get out of medical school and they specialize and you go into whatever different type of residency you want to go into. And then that's the second section of becoming a doctor. And your residency is really a form of low-paid slavery that you go into your specialization and work with those particular doctors in that specialty, and they treat you like a slave and you do their dirty work for next to no pay for however many years. If you're going to be a neurosurgeon, it's 8-year residency. If a cardiologist is a 5 or 6 year residency, other specializations are 4-year residencies and 3-year residencies. So by the time you're done with your medical school and your residency, I mean, if you think about if you get involved in university at all, you have 4 years university and you graduate from that, those people then got to go graduate 4 years of medical school, and then they got to go graduate from their residency. And then a lot of them do another 2-year fellowship on top of that. It's no surprise that when we're talking about this pandemic or talking about anything related to what you were just discussing, there's no surprise that a lot of these physicians are rather closed-minded and have a hard time thinking outside of what they have been taught, because it's years and years and years of conditioning. And I've been a part of that conditioning, so I know, from firsthand,
I've brought that up too, and how like we know what boot camp in the military is, right?
Yeah.
We understand that like that's kind of designed to break a person and make them, ready to be order followers in that way. What's the difference really between that and medical school? These people are starving. They're up for 24 to 48 hour shifts. They're not sleeping properly. They're not able to look after themselves. They're under a tremendous amount of stress. I'm sure their brain is honeycombing just like it is if you're dealing with someone in a boot camp in the military. So yeah, and then the other thing, like listen to what you just pointed out in terms of time, plus all the amount of money that they've spent along the way, all of the sacrifices they've made. Once they're at that point and they're like established and they've that's all behind them, and then something like a pandemic, the joy comes along, you're not going to be kind of in a mental space where you can possibly even question lollipop versus sugar-free, or definitely not in a place where you can speak up because you're a little worried about losing all of that investment, right? If you can even think that far ahead of things, you're worried about losing everything you've just spent an entire lifetime, all of those personal sacrifices, literal torture in order to achieve, so it makes sense to me too. It's disappointing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And another observation about medical students and residents in general that I've made is that after having taught them and written literature for them and examined them and done this for years, and recruited physicians, I can tell you that physicians aren't on average brilliant. You don't have to be brilliant to be a doctor. It doesn't mean you're smarter than the average person. What separates people that are able to get through medical school and residency from other people is that they are finishers. They have self-discipline because that's what it takes to get through it. It doesn't take intelligence. I know people that were quite stupid that were able to get through, many people who are quite stupid that were able to get through medical school and get through residency and are now working doctors. And it wasn't their intelligence that got there. You have to have a basic intelligence or you can't do the work, but you don't have to be brilliant to go through medical school. So that's a mischaracterization that a lot of lay people have, that physicians somehow are more intelligent or should be held in a higher reverence when it comes to their intelligence than the average person, that they're technically not, although some of them are quite brilliant, because brilliant people are attracted to the profession, but there's hundreds and thousands of them that are just a very average intelligence, but they happen to be hard workers. So if you work hard, you'll get through medical school and you'll get through residency. And there's some really bad doctors out there, really bad ones. George Carlin has that old joke. Doesn't it freak you out that somewhere in the world right now is the worst doctor in the world and somebody's got an appointment with that guy on Monday?
Yeah, like I
always laughed about that.
The pandemic has pulled up a lot of statistics, and when it came to, I had kind of got in this debate with someone when it came to segregating lollipop versus sugar-free from healthcare. Someone was trying to put forth the argument that I actually forgot my train of thought.
Oh,
But the basic idea just being that, like, we're allowing these people who are unhealthy to make the choice of who's healthy enough to receive treatment. And there's so many different factors. Like, this person who has their lollipops could be, and I mean, like, I'm not judging, I'm a smoker, could be someone who like smokes and drinks and does cocaine and all of these different things. And this other person who is sugar free could be a person who looks after their diet, exercises every day. And we're deciding whose health is actually important based on what
socially constructed ideology. It's a completely socially constructed ideology that is subjective and arbitrary and based on a value that society has created that, like we said, it's arbitrary. It's an arbitrary value. Like, we have decided that tobacco is more harmful than sugar. And because we've decided that, a country like New Zealand will say, well, now tobacco is illegal completely for, this new thing they're doing. And someone says, yeah, what's wrong with that? It's a great idea. I'm a smoker and I'm for that. I'm like, well, okay, for one, you're violating a person's ability to choose, which doesn't build human beings up. It diminishes us when you take away choice. And beyond that, you've made this arbitrary judgment that tobacco is such a health threat. I'll bet you there are so many more people in the hospital. I would bet anything I have, there are so many more people in the hospital because of all of the refined sugar that is in all the food and things that we eat in New Zealand than there are people there because of complications related to tobacco. There aren't as many people that smoke as that consume sugar from the time they're kids, tons of it. It's that people just can't connect those health problems with the sugar. They don't connect it with the sugar. I'm not an enemy of sugar. I'm just saying, to be fair, we've decided that tobacco is this evil entity, and I'm for letting people choose, that's like charity. People say, well, we don't want you to, we don't need people to pay into charity because we'll just take the tax out of your paycheck and then we'll take care of poor people with the money. You don't need to worry about it. We'll take it out of your paycheck and we'll take care of the poor people with the money out of your paycheck. Great. So then I don't have to be a charitable person at all. You've done it for me. I don't have to develop that virtue in myself at all. I don't know. I'm super charitable, man. They take 60% of my paycheck and give it to poor people. So I'm charitable. I'm charitable, right? You're not. You haven't even developed that capacity in yourself because nobody gave you the chance to do it, So it's different trains of thought, regarding that,
Well, yeah, and it's like, it is a bit of a mass psychosis, I think, in a lot of ways. And I don't think that it's just the joy that brought on this mass psychosis. I think it's a combination of things. But I think that, like, we are kind of, there has been these arbitrary groups created and everybody's fighting for their tribe right now, almost like we're in a real life Game of Thrones and everybody wants the throne, right? And it's like, which one of these tribes, which one of these little groups that we're arbitrarily creating should get the Iron Throne? and now we're playing it just right now. We're playing it with our health. I mean, right before our health, it was, your president, I'm sorry, you're not into the States anymore, but the American president. Before that, it was, whatever. I think that the way that this is going, it should be really eye-opening to people that, just like what we were saying about specializations really not, interweaving the way that they should. I don't think health officials are even listening to each other the way that they should. They're quite clearly not looking at the data or the science, whichever way you want to look at that, from an overview. They're looking at it through the eyes of a political stance that they've already taken, right? It's like we've decided this, so now, like, we're only going to incorporate the data that feeds what we've decided. And it doesn't seem to matter how much more data comes out. Like, even the data from the same sources will start to prove those decisions wrong, but they don't seem to be redacting their decision or changing their
No.
course in any sort of way, which really kind of has to make you question what the actual agenda behind it is and whether the joy actually has anything to do with it. And yeah.
It should make a rational person take pause, and it should make you can anybody ever recall any kind of propaganda effort, to being subjected to any kind of push and propaganda effort for anything in our lifetime, the way that we have been coerced and pressured for these jabs? Can anybody ever recall that? I always ask them. I'm like, I personally cannot think of any continual, relentless propagandization and demonization of people who aren't succumbing to it. If you were refusing to succumb to that pressure, I read something about 6 months ago. They were talking about, first, when you want someone to do something, like typical sociopathic behaviors, like when you want somebody to do something, first you try and use fear, like make them scared, like, oh, you do this or else this will happen to you. And then when people don't succumb to that fear, that group, then you use grift. You try and buy it with something. You try and say, well, if you do what I'm telling you, you'll get this. You'll get freedom. You'll get money. You'll get a gift. You'll get a free donut. You'll get this. And when that doesn't work, there's still this group that didn't succumb to the fear, that didn't succumb to the grift. Then the final thing is, then you threaten violence of some kind. I'm going to hurt you if you don't do this. Then I will take away your livelihood. I will take away things that you owe, things that you enjoy, you love. I'll take away your freedom. And people don't see where that eventually goes. It eventually goes to, I'll take away your life. Eventually it goes to that. People don't like to believe that it can go there, but that's where it goes. That's what an intelligent person can see when you look forward, but people are too clouded to see that. They're too clouded to see that's where this is going.
Well, as someone who reads a lot also, I mean, like, it doesn't matter if we're reading history or if we're reading fiction, we still see this concept play out all the time, like almost as if it's like a subroot of human nature and it's destined to be that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I don't believe that that's true. It's just like, if you're taking that view, it could have seemed that way. And yet people still, I don't know, it's this cognitive dissonance of them just not believing it could happen, while it's happening,
Yeah. But they wouldn't have believed. That's the funny thing. That's what's so funny when you look back and you look at the conspiracy theorists when this all started. People say, "Oh boy, guys, you realize what's going on, don't you?" And be like, "Oh no," and they're like, "No, man, do you see what's happening now? Do you know where this is going to go?" And they're like, "No." And then here it is, 2 years later, unfolding exactly like that person said, and then other people are like, "No, you're still just a conspiracy theorist. It's not true." It is a cognitive dissonance. It's a refusal. It's a blindness. It is a intentional blindness that's understandable. I understand it because that's what happens to us when reality is something that we don't want to accept. We just don't want to accept the reality because it intrudes on our accepted. You and I. This is the topic that we used to talk about all the time 10 years ago. When reality intrudes too much on what your accepted paradigm is, you just refuse to accept it, and you call anybody crazy that. And I think that's what we're going through. Yeah.
We definitely are. It's it's not a matter of it coming anymore. It's a matter of it is here and now, and
it's here.
It's the same thing from 10 years ago to now as it is a year ago to now. Like, this has been kind of bubbling over time, and people have been warning, like, this is a slippery slope. This is a dangerous path to go walking down. And if we start allowing that to happen, then we also allow this to happen. We're not seeing the unintended consequences of our decisions. And going back to, like, say, the uproar here that we had here in Canada when we started implementing a bunch of different gender roles and whatnot, and all these different the pronouns and all of that.
Yeah, the Jordan Peterson stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And he was kind of right where he was standing, like, look, it's not that, like, I have a problem with this. It's that I see where this is going to go. And if we submit to this now, then it's going to allow this to happen. Well, it did. And it did allow that to happen. But if we allow that to happen, then we're also going to allow this to happen. And, people are starting to catch on that, like, where in history have we ever given power to our government and got it back? You know what I mean? Even in emergency times, like even little things, like give me an example where the government's ever said, okay, well, we're going to stop letting people do this for now.
Yeah. Or
It's
censorship.
Yeah.
Where in history has there been an incidence of censorship that ever went anywhere good? It doesn't take it. Burnings. Yeah. It didn't. We got rid of some witches, so that was good. No, I love Wiccans. I'm just kidding. No, but I'm just saying, when has censorship ever gone, any level of censorship, even the least modicum of it, ever gone anywhere good? It never does. It never goes anywhere good. Again, that's another one of these things, though, that you and I are seeing, and it seems self-evident to us, and it's almost like, you come back to that tribalism thing. I mean, it's almost like we've entered a time in reality where many of us exist in a different world than the other people exist in, yet we're cohabitating in the same world. And you can take that to whatever depth that you want. And I probably wouldn't argue with you, because I believe in that on a lot of levels, that we are existing in different worlds, in the same world. Because perception creates this reality. We can argue that for days, but perception creates your reality. And you walk around making yourself into a hammer, you're going to see nails all over that you're going to see them, whereas somebody else won't. And so your own perception definitely is affecting this, and I think we are seeing that play out.
Yeah, the way it makes sense to me is almost like a point in evolution. Like there's almost like this kind of split going on between us, or maybe it's multiple splits going on between us, where multiple
probably.
Yeah, the human race is kind of evolving, and there's a bunch of different factors at play. There's it seems like our planet's doing the same thing. You know what I mean? So we're going to have to deal with that, and we also are now introducing this whole new world of technology to ourselves, and like the concept of augmenting and virtualizing reality. The concept of the metaverse is kind of a big topic right now, because we're looking at this future going, wait a second, like if we don't get this under control, then that's going to take over everything. And when it does take over everything, what's the world going to start to look like? And I think that, all of this division, or maybe the reason for the joy, if you will, it is also kind of playing into that. It's like, you look at, someone was kind of making fun of the Build Back Better and relating it to MAGA, but like, that's not a fair comparison, because it's not Joe Biden who's saying Build Back Better. It's the global community is saying Build Back Better. It's not his phrase, right?
Exactly.
And so you got to listen to what that kind of means, and the fact that they're all saying it, and this is happening everywhere. And even without, and maybe you'll understand this because you work in schools, when the lockdowns started happening, schools were prepared. You know what I mean? Like they had things ready to roll out already, because someone has been telling them for the last, like, since 2012 till now, that they need to get prepared for something. Now that something is here, and those are two really big dots that people need to connect, is how quickly they did everything, how ready they were for something that you can't be ready for. You can't be prepared if it's just nature mutating emotion, joy.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you hit two good points there. I want to circle back to one of the things you said on the AI and augmented reality, but just on the school point really quickly, is like I don't know how many people remember, and I'm sure you remember, but this isn't the first time that they've tried to do this. They tried this other times. The biggest one that pops to mind, which was just the most atrocious bungling, was swine flu. They tried to make swine flu a global pandemic. They declared swine flu a global pandemic and pushed everybody to get this super cool swine flu vaccine that they just cranked off the shelf fast as fast could be. They did what they did. They did Operation Warp Speed with it, and it made about 60 people sick and die, and they pulled it. And the other thing that happened is they couldn't get buy-in from the public. They declared because swine flu wasn't making people very sick. So nobody bought into it. And they said, no, 60 million people worldwide have caught swine flu. And people are like, yeah, but no one's even getting sick. Nobody bought into it. So it was a fail. It was a flop. They tried to sell swine flu. Then they tried to do it with Zika virus. And they said, what's the one segment of population who are the most fearful? Pregnant moms. We'll tell them that their babies' heads are going to be tiny if they get Zika. Zika's coming, Zika is coming to get you. And people didn't buy into it. People are like, for one thing, pregnant women don't like getting jabs. They don't like getting vaccines. Most pregnant women say, well, I'll just stay home. In general, I'm generalizing. Most pregnant women just want to stay home in their house and they'll hide the whole time they're pregnant and just wait for the baby to come. And then they don't want to go get jabbed. It's very hard to convince pregnant women. Even now, it's hard to convince them to go out and get it. They're a very hesitant group, demographic. And they couldn't do it with Zika. They couldn't do it with swine flu. There was a couple other, I can't remember, but swine flu was the most recent one. So they have tried this, swine flu being the most recent iteration before. They had obviously the first SARS, but it wasn't transmissible enough. They wanted that to take off, but not enough people got it. You guys in Toronto, it killed about 20 people or something up there. I can't remember. And that was 2004, the first, yeah. And it killed like 50, 60 people worldwide. And it was the first SARS coronavirus was pretty deadly respiratory infection. It's the same thing. This, I don't know what your thoughts are completely, but just from following you online, I pretty much am, my dad, just full disclosure. So my dad, what's my personal connection to all this? The joy. My dad was fully jabbed. And my brother was fully jabbed. They both caught the joy after that, and they both ended up hospitalized and both almost died. Both came close to death. And my dad in particular had a doctor come into his room when he was barely able to breathe and tell him, oh, you're lucky. Oh, did you have the jab? Oh, you're lucky you had those. If you hadn't, you'd probably be dead right now. My dad was like, what? He says he couldn't even believe. Now, he's not an advocate for these things at all. He now says, he's against them completely. But when people tell me, I've had people tell me that, are you going to, I just laugh. I'm like, almost everybody I know here in England, almost everyone I know who's had the joy in a serious way was fully jabbed. They weren't the unjabbed. I know the people who are unjabbed in my circle, and I have a big circle here. I know who they are. I know that they haven't been sick. I know the people that have been sick. I know who they are. I have a bunch of old people in our family here who caught it, and I know, what's really going on here. I think I do. I think I have a handle on it. I think you do too. And it's, I have a couple of different ideas within that idea. I have the general idea of what I think's happening, and then I have a general idea of some other sub motives and sub routines that could happen with this. So we'll have to see. But
yeah, I mean, my understanding is that they never let a good crisis go to waste. Yeah. So like whether let's give them a huge benefit of the doubt and say that they didn't plan this, they just jumped on it. It's still not going to be used for just one thing. Like they've got a bunch of different shit they want to pull off, and they can use it for a lot of different things, from the way that automation works, because that's been kind of a threat they've been throwing at us for a while, right? Like I know in Canada they throw around the UBI concept yearly because of automation and everything else, and I guess that happened in the States too. You guys had Andrew Yang, I think it was, kind of run on a platform kind of warning of the same things. And then like on the other side, like even medical care, like, like there's a bunch of advances coming in that means that they need to start training technicians to like kind of replace nurses in places, and that's getting weird, right? And there's a bunch of changes in society that are kind of necessary for all of these new technologies to work. Like our infrastructure needs to kind of change, especially like if you consider something like electric cars and they're kind of push, like right now they're basically giving Teslas away in Canada right now because they want everyone on electric cars, but we don't have the infrastructure to support that system yet. But part of what this Build Back Better will allow them to do is to implement infrastructure like that, right? And another thing that I think kind of happened, which relates to what you were saying, why these other viruses didn't take off, I think what they learned was if we're all out in public and we're seeing each other and we're not seeing people, sick, then we're going to kind of be awake. And I think that the lockdown immediately was to make sure and give us the perception that this was really deadly. We really, really needed to avoid each other and all of the above. And like, firsthand experience, I know that deaths in nursing homes due to COVID were very compounded with death to neglect due to everyone staying home and being scared to death to go to these places, right? I actually got a job in the middle of it because that was the factor where nobody wanted to do the job because everyone was too scared. I've heard doctors say the same thing, that like doctors were like deliberately not seeing patients because the doctors were scared of getting the joy, right? And I don't think a lot of people really realize the psychological impact that all had on our perception. And like you were saying, perception kind of creates our reality, right? So on our perception of what the joy is, how deadly it is, and what are our steps to get rid of it, how important those are when weighed against things like personal freedom, things like, our mental health, and just like we don't seem to care about sugar killing millions of people a year, we don't seem to care about opioids killing millions of people a year either. We're going to prescribe more of them now that we have everybody locked down. It makes no sense, right? Like that. And so clearly there's something else going on there. And I'm seeing it now with the automation. Like every store has added like self-checkout. We have staffless grocery stores opening up where it's like there's not even people there. You fob your way in, you do your shopping, you check yourself out, and that's it. These changes are happening, and it's a lot of it, if not all of it, is kind of based around technology. And the rollout of this technology is something that I also know from, and I know you will see this too, that like this technology didn't just manifest out of the pandemic of the joy, right? Like all of this technology was clearly all in development long before this came out. The fact that it's coming out like this tidal wave is not coincidental to the joy itself.
No, I don't believe it's coincidental either. And I think you hit on a really good point there, that a lot of these technologies, it circles back to what you mentioned earlier with the AI and Philip Corso. I'm not sure how familiar any of your viewers will be with them or whether they will or not. But when he wrote, Day After Roswell, he mentioned in his book that the very real concern in the Pentagon's Office of Foreign Technology was that the artificial intelligence technology, the silicon microchips that they recovered in the Roswell crash, that the intention was that we would take that and use it and develop it into an AI, which would then supplant us as the dominant life form on the planet. And that they had a very real fear that it was intentional, but they couldn't allow that fear to keep them from developing it because we needed it for the competitive edge. But it was an idea that was brought up. Maybe this was intentionally left for us, knowing we would then take this, begin and that is, in the 1947 to 1953 to 1960, that time frame, it was the beginning of what we now have as artificial intelligence systems that probably exist beyond your or my conception. And they started then with the things that we recovered in those very early crash, I believe, within those very early crash recoveries, like at Roswell and like Cape Girardeau in Missouri, these, or maybe even the Aurora incident, these early things that going back, we were perhaps seeded with this. Perhaps it was, perhaps it was a trap of some kind, We don't know.
Well, its rollout so far sure as fuck feels like a trap. Look at what these algorithms are doing with people on social media, and like what it's doing to like humanity in terms of their mental, emotional, spiritual health, right? Like it's really kind of, if you think of like an invasion type of scenario, there's a movie called The Fifth Wave that kind of like lays out how like the idea of like aliens coming to the planet and just invading outright, kind of crazy, because clearly we're going to respond in a very negative way. If you want to do that, you want to do it kind of in steps, and that's no different than, and everyone hates this comparison, but like what Nazi Germany did in implementing like, the steps that led to all of that atrocity, or the steps that we're seeing being implemented into our current atrocity. If you were going to invade you from another planet, you would kind of implement very similar things. Yeah. And the idea of like giving your enemy the weapon of its own destruction, right? That's not even new in mythology, right? It's not. Yeah,
not a new concept, and it's an archetype concept in the human psyche, to be honest, and it's been with us that long. It goes all the way back to partaking of the tree of knowledge. It's this idea that you partake, or you're given, or you take something that you think is going to be the key to something wonderful, and it gives you that, but it also gives you sows the seed of your destruction, in that, and certainly. I mean, my views on the AI thing is obviously, I think it's already here. I think, Musk's warnings are a little late for the public. I think they've behind the scenes, it's a super weapon. The AI is a super weapon, stronger than nuclear weaponry or anything else. I've talked to people about a lot of people don't seem to grasp it. It's not on a lot of people's radar. I know it's on yours. And I tell them, like, think about if you were to assemble a room of the 10 most brilliant people in the world, hands down, 10 smartest scientists in every field, and you build a think tank of those people. You have it, and your government has access to these 10 people, and they're the most brilliant people in the world. They're so brilliant, they can think 10 steps ahead of anything the enemy is going to do. They come up with plans, they come up with figures. These are the 10 most brilliant people in the world. Imagine having a computer that is 1,000 times smarter than those 10 most brilliant people in the world. And imagine having that as your advisor, telling you what moves to make in relationship to your perceived enemies on this planet. And imagine where that can go. Imagine how frightening of a super weapon that is. Dude, would you even be afraid of anybody else's nuclear weapons, anybody else's anything? No, because that computer could tell you how to subvert them, their weapons. It could tell you how to take steps so that they never use them, or to teach, how to undermine them from the inside. It could tell you how to collapse anything that you want to collapse, because everything can be collapsed. Everything has legs that it stands on, and it's a matter of taking them out. The idea of an AI is frightening. It should be frightening to anybody. And I hate to say it. I think it's probably already present in the world in some iteration, and could already be working. And I think it's silly, just like when people think about extraterrestrials or time travelers, I think it's silly to think, well, if it were here, then we would see it like this. That's how I know it's not, because it would do this. And I always think that's so silly, because, or if aliens are here, they would do. We don't know what something like that would do. I tell people, you don't. So no, you're wrong. You're looking, saying if they were there, they would do this. It's just, that's your brain projecting. You don't have any idea what something like that would do, or how it would stay hidden, or how cunning it would be. You don't have any idea. You're thinking at a very shallow level. You think it would be that simple.
Yeah. Like, and this boom in technology, it's very undeniable, and it's just as compartmentalized as anything else, right? Like, people aren't really understanding how, like, they can look at a movie like The Matrix and they can be like, okay, well, I could see how that could be possible if we had X, Y, and Z. We do have X, Y, and Z. You just don't see X, Y, and Z as being connected yet, because no one's put it together in one package, right? Because I was even looking at like those suicide pods that Sweden was broadcasting the other day, and being like,
those things are cool looking,
familiar, and like, even the process that they're talking about going with that, like, that sounds familiar. And just couple that technology with the multiverse just for a second, and then this other stuff that DARPA's talking about reading people's dreams and shit. Oh my goodness, the fuck. I'm going to take all three of those components and I'm going to build my own little matrix. I mean, that's how kind of close we are to, these type of things. And before we leave, like, I don't want to go too far in conspiracy land. I got a whole other podcast for that. We can we can do that one day. But before I leave that, I do want to bring up that I do think that the boom of the UFO releases that the Pentagon is doing will lead eventually to them admitting that yes, they've recaptured these, like, recovered crash from it. And then and then we will also kind of be able to connect the dots between that and this sudden boom, since and you and I have noticed the dates all along, but like a lot of other people don't connect those dots in their brain, that like since these alleged UFO crashes, we've had all of this technology just kind of come out of nowhere. And I don't think it's reasonable to throw the baby out with the bathwater and think that that's just coincidence. So, but to turn away from that, since we used to talk on a regular basis up until now, you became a daddy, not once, but now twice. So, it was my first time face to face to get to say congratulations.
Thanks, man.
Been loving the picture. They're adorable.
Thank you.
Wife's a beautiful lady. You met her at the same time. I like you told the story to the listeners. I knew what was going on, right? Like, I think we were kind of both going through our own version of that, really. At that time. So, it's been really beautiful to, vicariously get to watch, the rise of the Phoenix, so to speak, after all of that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it was, becoming a dad is certainly, certainly the most shattering, humbling thing, no, you're a dad, right? Yeah. So you know what I'm talking about. And, it's certainly the most, humbling and disassembling of your persona, thing that ever happened. I often have told people that, like, for the first time when I had my son for the first time in my life, I understood what being unselfish was for the first time in my whole life. And I'm not a selfish person or anything, but you just don't understand what it is to realize that what you necessarily need and want, it suddenly occurs to you that that's not important anymore, as long as this person, it's living for somebody else for the first time. You realize that, and it's weird. You you're at this stage, you barely comb your hair. I was able to comb my hair for this podcast thing, but I, like, most of the time, don't have time. I don't have time to do it. I'm just too busy, and I don't, things that are more important. I've got dirty diapers to change and kids to put food in their mouth. It just, it's an amazing experience, and it shows you who you really are, for sure. As opposed to, like, that we talked about earlier, a socially constructed ideology of who you want to be. It shows you who you really are when you become a parent.
Absolutely. Yeah. Did you find? I love Joe Rogan's quote of, like, it will change you, let it change you. And I will parrot that for forever, because it's the best way to say it. It definitely does. One of the things that I noticed almost immediately, and you might be able, like, you're talking about your upbringing and stuff. And one of the first things I think you think of is I won't let that happen to them, or I don't want them to have, or I do want them to, based on our own experiences. But just the idea of like letting this child kind of live their own life and express it, because mine are both older now. Like I have 22 and a 15-year-old, right?
Wow. No
so
way.
Like, yeah, like my kids, I joke with them because I met their young when I met their mother, sorry, when I was quite young. She's like 5 years older than me. So I've been able to, like, my youngest is now the same age as I was when I met their mother. And the oldest one is older now than they were than I was when they were born. Right.
Yeah.
So well, my oldest turned 18. I remember being like, "Hey, buddy, you ready to be a dad?" But like, the biggest thing that it changed in me was my perception of not only my own parents, but other parents.
Yeah.
Right. And then, as well as changing my perception of other parents, it just changed my perception of other humans as well, because you realize how important this stage of childhood actually is.
Yeah.
And and there's been a phenomenal amount of discoveries. Like I didn't really I study trauma a lot, but I didn't really ever consider inherited trauma.
Yeah.
Which you know what I mean? And because I've always been like a bit of a cycle breaker when I run people through therapy. That's always the focus, right? Is breaking cycles. But recognizing that like a cycle can be broken, in that like I'm not going to do to my child what had been done to me. They're still picking things up that I went through. And that's a whole other level of like, wow, am I ever like, responsible for this human? Right?
Yeah. Thanks. I'm glad you said that. That's in psychoanalytical theory, we're all trying to heal traumas that happen to us at different points in our life. Most of the big ones when we were young, and we spend the rest of our life trying to heal those, and our patterns feed into those traumas, and we seek out how to we seek out how to heal those, and sometimes not healthy ways and things. And like you said, that brings us to those cycles that you're talking about too. And that's my understanding of what you were just saying. But you're absolutely right about the opening your eyes a little bit to your own parents and how you were raised and what effect it had on you, and where there were lacks, where there were things that were missed, and it really shows you and kind of opens your eyes to how poor other people are at parenting. And like it's not so surprising that a lot of people in our society are the way they are when you watch with how little deference some people treat those delicate ages where the kids are developing their personality, and where they are they're important developmental stages where a person is figuring out who they're going to be. And you see how poorly some parents handle it, and it doesn't surprise you that people are the way they are in our society, because people parent very, very badly some children, and some people do it on purpose. Some people just do it out of ignorance or stupidity, and some people do it because they were parented badly and they're just copying what they were shown. And I've been through that same thing. I don't want my kid to have to go through what I went through. But apparently there's trauma, like you said, there's trauma that there's trauma in our genetic code. There's trauma that's in the genes, apparently, right? Like you were saying, that they can experience fears and phobias and all kinds of things, manifestations from that. So I think that's definitely been established in scientific studies.
Yeah, it's just so interesting. How that process all works, and I think it's important for us to like consider that when we are dealing with other people, whether it's on the internet or whether it's at the grocery store and whatnot, and how all of this and I think it's come up in many different ways throughout this conversation. Just that there's a reason why people think the way that they do, and it's important to figure that out, right? And we can't say like don't judge people. We all judge people to some extent, but at the same time, you know, we all started in the same place. And if we're humble and honest about, you know, how this develops and all of the steps that we've been talking about throughout this podcast, then we should be able to have a little bit more empathy, a little bit more compassion and understanding for others as well, right? So it's a good way to kind of wrap it all up, because I've taken up a bunch of your time today.
That's okay.
I very much have missed, you know, your presence in my life. I've been thinking about you a lot lately because I've been writing a book, which we'll talk about another time. But I'm also going to, I have the audio, I've almost used it a few times, of Synergy, if you remember Synergy that we did back in the day. So I'm going to throw that on the end of this, even though it's a little bit long, but people can check it out. And what it is a collaboration between Josh, myself, and our partner at the time, Tanya, who graced her beautiful voice to Josh's beautiful writing, and I wrapped music around it, and it's awesome. A very, very lovely little piece. So I'll throw that on the end. And Josh, thank you very much. Mad love and respect to you, my friend.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, I look forward to the next time. Yeah, it's been really enjoyable. Thank you for the conversation, and appreciate the opportunity to come and chat with you.
We will definitely have to do it again.
Yes,
bye, everybody at home.
We come to you now from the space between, from the place where your eyes are always open. We come to you from where you truly are. We ask that you listen now, as this story is about humankind's awakening. And even more so, it is about your awakening. For your awakening is humankind's awakening. Indeed, there is no difference. You stand now at the threshold of a new world, one which takes courage and vision to embrace. But if you choose to open your eyes in this moment, it will prove to be a doorway to a new consciousness, a new you. Humankind's struggle to awaken is a tale of seasons and the wind. It is a tale of success and much failure. It is also a tale of darkness and the light. From time immemorial, man has looked into the heavens for guidance, measuring the days and seasons of his life by the turning of the blossom and the great cycles of death and renewal, by which nature sets her clock. Initially, humans too governed their lives by these seasons, living and dying with the waves, bearing their children along the way. What was seen in the heavens was reflected in the hearts of men and found reality in their dreams and earthly pleasures. The earth itself held them in the palm of her hand, a small band living out its days on this blue jewel hanging in the blackness of space. But there were greater realities to be known, and the innocence of the human mind escaped with knowledge of the self. Humans sank into a dream and built great edifices and societies that were out of balance with all that is. And in the passage of time, his connection was turned over by the hoe of forgetfulness and the promise of new possibilities. Great civilizations rose and fell as humankind fought to control an unpredictable world and to hoard resources which seemed rare and precious. These events occurred many times in the history of this sphere, the record of which is now lost to the ages and must be sought out on the skein of space and time. Now, once again, mankind has reached the crest of the wave. As in each instance before, you are now confronted with nothing more than yourselves. The thread that connects you to all that is and all that will be has never broken. The problems, wars, and pestilences of this world are a reflection of the turmoil inside of you. There's only one way to awaken from this nightmare of your own creation. You must find a new way of seeing yourselves. It begins with breathing. Your breath is the eternal here and now. It is that which is always real, is always with you, and always belongs to you. It is mirrored in the great turning of the seasons and in the waves crashing upon the shore. The simple act of watching your breath brings you to that place between, the place where you can speak to you. So we ask you now, in this first transmission, when you open your eyes in the morning, feel yourself breathing. When you read the news of wars and turmoil, feel yourself breathing. When the madness of your fellow man spills upon the streets, feel yourself breathing. When you're overcome with frustrations and failures, feel yourself breathing. When you see something you love, feel yourself breathing. And when you close your eyes at night and give yourself the hands of light and shadow, feel yourself breathing. This is the first step. You see, you never really left that time of innocence and connection, the time before the clock. And we have always been there, waiting and watching. You simply stopped looking. Now, in this time of great upheaval in your world, we are asking you to look again, to look closer, like a child who must awaken from the bad dream. We are now caressing your cheek in urging you to open your eyes and rejoin the living. We also ask you to remember that from outside of time and space, this struggle of humankind and all its attendant horrors and beauty has formed a great shimmering tapestry, a symphony of light and shadow that echoes across the dimensions. Therefore, curse it not. Like all great music, the melody is now rapidly approaching a crescendo, and every note carries with it a key to the next. You are a note in this symphony. You must play your tone. The song in your breath, in your breathing, is the first note that you can sing. Feel yourself breathing. We have delivered this message from the space between, the space where you always are. By simply listening to this message, you have attracted the attention of some very important people. We are with you, and you are loved beyond all imagination.